All right, here we are. Star Wars Outer Rim by Fantasy Flight Games. So excited to show you guys how to play this game. Really have a lot of fun with it. So let's start out with the components and setup for the game. Setup's pretty straightforward. First thing you do, I've got it mostly set up here for a 2-player game. We put the board together. It's a puzzle piece board. This is the suggested layout. You can then randomize later as you play the game. It'll throw the balance a little bit off, but it'll also, change up the locations of the planets and give you a little more variety. But right now we set that up. We take these contact tokens that will either have a white, yellow, or a green border on them. We'll randomize those as far as their colors go and then place them on the board in the specified spots. Each spot on the board has a color. So the colors will always be in the same spot on the different sectors, but the characters will be randomized, so you never know where anyone's at. Those contacts can be crew that you gain throughout the game, or they can be bounties that you're looking for. Also, we've got these patrols. There's a patrol for the Rebel faction, the Syndicate, the Imperials, and the Hutts. I've flipped the level 1 patrols onto the first nav point of next to each of their stacks. They have a strength and a cash value for being defeated on the level 1s. They'll sometimes give you fame for being defeated. They're going to hinder your movement or possibly just give you money and fame for defeating them. Then we've separated and shuffled each of the decks for the sectors and planets. Each sector has 1 to 2 planets on it, and the cards will then, if you encounter that sector or the planet that you're on, you will encounter it from this card. There's also one if you're on any nav points, so you'll just encounter a nav point. Also, we have our market decks set up here. So your market decks consist of these 6 decks. You've got a bounty deck, a cargo deck, a gear and mods deck, a job deck, luxury, and ships. That's right, you can upgrade your ships, which is awesome. You can get some of the legendary smugglers ships such as Slave 1 and the Millennium Falcon. So that's always cool. Now what we need to do here to finish setup is flip the top one of each of these decks over so that it is visible to all players. And we'll talk about them a little more later. Okay, now we're done with board setup. Except for our supply here, as you can see with damage tokens, the dice, which are familiar if you've played X-Wing or Armada. You've got hits, crits, focus, and a blank side. Those will be used for combat and for doing skill tests throughout the game. Also, we have personal goal markers and credits in 1, 5, and 10,000 credit denominations. That's it for the board setup. Now let's move on to each player's personal player board. So we've got Han Solo has been selected. Also, player 2 has selected Lando Calrissian, his old nemesis turned buddy. So, if you look at your card, you have your attack value, your bodily armor or hit points basically. Also, you have a special ability. Han's special ability gives his ship 2 more light speed movement. And then a personal goal. Han's personal goal is have a ship with a cost of at least 15,000 credits to gain 1 flame and flip this card. And when you flip this card, instead of having another personal goal, you will then have another special ability. Also, at the very bottom of every player card, there are skills. Han has piloting and tech. Lando has a slightly different array of stats and skills, and his skills are influence, knowledge, and piloting, and he has a different personal goal. He wants to deliver 2 illegal cargo to gain a fame and flip his card. And then each player will select one of a starting ship. Starting ships either come in a G9 rigger or a G1A starfighter configuration. They have slightly different stats. If you look at your ships, they have their light speed, that's how far they can move. Then they have their attack value, which is how many dice they roll in ship-to-ship combat. And then their hull, which is their damage or armor. So Han is going to select the rigger, and the Lando player will have the starfighter. So that's all set up. Then also, we will take a look at the very bottom of your player card will have this little fine print that you probably can't read that says setup card and a number, and then gives you some reputation to start with. So this one gives Han negative hut reputation. These reputation markers all start at neutral, and they will change throughout the game either to negative, neutral, or positive. And that's going to affect the way you interact with some of the patrols and some of the cards in the game. So we're going to get setup card 91 for him in just a second. Lando has setup card 91 as well, and he starts with a positive reputation in any faction of his choice. So he's just going to counter Han and get a positive hut reputation. Then we'll select those startup cards out of this data bank deck. It's important to keep this deck in order from game to game. So there are multiple 91s, so we'll just randomly give a 91 to each of these players. Then you'll look at that, and it's going to give you either a bounty, a job, or cargo, or a mod, or something to get you started in the game. Also, it's going to tell you your starting location. Starting location for Han is Nal Hutta. So we'll put Han right here on Nal Hutta, and he's going to then have a cargo to start the game with. The destination for this cargo is the Ring of Kefrain. He will gain 5,000 for delivering it. We'll talk about how that works later, but right now he's just going to slot that in to his starting ship's one cargo spot. Then Lando has a starting planet of the Ring of Kefrain. So he's there. They are destined to meet up. And his destination that he's trying to deliver his luxury wares to is Nal Hutta, which is where, so I mean, these guys are destined to, this game is designed to make these encounters that you've seen in the movies and stuff happen. So his reward is 5,000 as well. So that's going to slot into his cargo slot. And now we're completely set up for the game. So let's move on to how to play the game. All right, here we are. How to play Star Wars Outer Rim. We've got through the setup, except for I forgot one thing, giving the starting credits. First player gets 4,000 credits. Second player gets 6,000, then 8,000 and 10,000 if you're playing a 4-player game. So just to make sure we've got everything covered, that's the starting credits. And then we'll take player turns. So starting player is the Han Solo player. First thing they're going to do is consult this little player turn card, which also has some other things about how to gain fame and how to do skill tests and things on the back. Very handy. It's going to be really all you need to do to learn the rules of this game. So the first thing you do in your turn, which is broken up into 3 steps, is the planning step. Step 1. You will choose one of these 3 options. You can either move your ship up to your ship's speed, which Han's ship has a speed of 6, and his special ability gives him 2 extra speed, so he can move a total of 8. Here's how movement works. So you move along nav points or planets. You can move less than your full movement or up to your full movement. So Han has got a cargo that he wants to get to the Ring of Kefrain. The shortest distance to the Ring of Kefrain is 9 spots, so he cannot quite make it there, but he can make it either to this nav point or to any of the planets in between. And the choice he has to make there is, does he want to encounter a planet card or check out some of these contact tokens, or does he just want to encounter a nav point card and be as close as he possibly can? I think Han is going to choose to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so that he can encounter a card at Naboo and see what's going on there, because then he will have enough movement to get to the Ring of Kefrain on his next turn, as long as one of these patrols do not stop him. So that's the simplest way of making your movement. If you're unobstructed, you can do your movement. There's a couple of things that can obstruct your movement. The first is these patrol tokens, which will move based on when someone buys a card from the market, which we'll get into in the market action. But right now they start off at the first nav point closest to them, and they're level 1s. They can be encountered for the level 1s all have, that's a level 2. The level 1s all have 3 combat value, so they'll roll 3 dice against you in ship combat, and the first level 1 is worth 5,000. So it's going to move along the board towards you whenever market cards are done. Now, if you encounter one, so let's say that this token is moved onto a player, either Han or Lando, it must stop once it encounters a player, regardless of their faction reputation. It just stops their movement. But if, let's say, this Imperial patrol was here, and Han wanted to go from Nal Hutta and make his move like he did, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as long as he has neutral, which he does, or negative, he must stop on that patrol's space. If he has positive reputation with that faction, he can fly on by. So since he has neutral with them, if that was the case, he would have to stop there. Now, in neutral, they will not fight him. He can fight them if he chooses to in the final step, the encounter phase, but they do stop his movement, unless he's got positive reputation, in which case they don't bat an eye and he flies right by them. So that's the other way that your movement can be hindered. The one other spot on the board that can hinder movement is right here, the Maelstrom. So let's say that Han is on Mon Calamari and he's got a job that he wants to complete the Kessel run. So he's got to get to Kessel right here. He moves 1, 2, and then when he hits that Maelstrom, he must stop. Regardless of anything else, he must stop on the Maelstrom, which means that in the final step of his phase, final step of his turn, he will encounter the Maelstrom card. And the Maelstrom card is a double-edged sword. It allows you, it will test you for sure in some way, and negative things could happen to you. But if you succeed in that test, most times you will get an entire another turn, which means you can then make it onto your destination. It's just hindering you on your way there. So that's the two ways that your movement can be hindered during your turn. Let's see. So he stopped there at Naboo. Now, after the movement phase is done, you move on to the second step. All right, so in the action step, unlike in the planning step where you choose one action, in the action step you can do as many actions as you can do on the location that you are. So you can perform any or all, delivering cargo and bounties, taking a market action, or trading cards with another player in your space. So let's go over those in order. So deliver cargoes and bounties. If Han had made it to the Ring of Kefrain, he would be able to, in this phase, deliver his vehicle parts and gain his 5,000 credits. But since he didn't quite make it there, he doesn't have any bounties that can be resolved on Naboo, nor does he have any cargo that can be delivered there, so he will skip that step. Also, he can take a market action. So this is sort of an in-depth thing, so we'll talk about that. All right, so taking a market action is completely voluntary, so you can choose on your turn to do this or not, and it's a two-step process. One thing that you can always do, whether or not you purchase any cards or not, is you can discard the top card from any one of these decks. So let's say you're not into this cargo that's available in the cargo deck for 1,000, the back to supplies, and you want to see what else is there, or you don't want to make it an easy cargo for someone else to get. You can flip it face down, put it at the bottom of the deck, and reveal the next one, which this is salvage. So it's going to Mon Calamari. So maybe that's better for you because you're closer to Mon Calamari at the time. You can do that to any one deck each time you take a market action. Then you can buy one card from the market row if you wish. So let's say that Han had 5,000 credits, right? And he knows that he's heard rumors of this rogue named Lando that's hanging out in the Ring of Kefrain, which he's trying to go to deliver his cargo, and that he tends to cheat at Sabacc, and so maybe he thinks there might be a scrap. He wants to get this blaster rifle, which is going to get him an extra die in combat and limit the amount of damage he can take. He's going to spend his 5,000 credits to purchase this. Places it in his gear slot on his player board. He then has that ability that's with that weapon, associated with that weapon. He then flips the top card of that deck over, and this is how the patrols will then move. You see what type of thing it is. So this is some armor that can add to your armor ability on your character, and you can see you can only have 2 things of gear at one time. Right now, this would move the Imperial Patrol 4. Active player chooses the route that the patrol takes. If there are multiple routes that go the same distance, if they run into a player, they stop, unless the one stipulation is if that patrol can make it to the active player with its number of movement, it must go to the active player. So since it's got a movement of 4, it would go 1, 2, 3. It must go to Han because it's able to with that number of movement. Once that happens, this becomes the next card on that deck, and that is how the patrols move around. Now, since Han has a neutral reputation with the Imperials, he's not going to be forced to encounter that patrol token on his final encounter step. But if he had a negative, then that would be bad, because he would have to encounter them and he wouldn't be able to encounter a card on Naboo or check out a contact token. If he then defeated them, he would get the rewards on them, and if he was defeated by them, he could move them one space away. So that's how the patrols move around, and that's how market actions work. You can also buy new ships in the market, just like the others. You can also cycle through the ship deck, just like the others. If you don't like the YT freighter, then you can put it to the bottom, flip it over, see what's next. You would get an aggressor class assault fighter. You could buy that for 15,000. Now, there's a thing in the market action called bartering, which you can do anytime. Anytime you're buying one of these 5 types of cards, you can barter any weapons that you have or cargo that you have that have price that you've spent towards that. So say I decide I really want to buy this luxury item, but I only have 15,000 credits. I can trade in this weapon for its full 5,000 credit value, put it back to the bottom of the deck, and then I have my 15,000 or my 20,000 to buy this chromium hull luxury item, right? So you can always barter cards that you have that have a value for their full value, as well as ships. Now, items cannot be bartered towards ships, and ships cannot be bartered towards the item decks, but if you buy this aggressor class assault fighter, then later on you want to upgrade to one of the $20,000 ships or whatever, you can by trading this ship in for 15,000. Now, the one thing is, once you bought an upgraded ship and sold it off, it's no longer available to any other player in the game. It's discarded from the game. So that's one thing to think about. If you cycle through ships, you're stopping everyone else's ability to get that type of ship. So again, that is how market actions work. They trigger the movement of the patrols, and it's a 2-step process. You can discard and then not buy, or discard and buy, or buy without discarding, or do none of the above. And that can only be done if you're on a planet space. You cannot do a market action from a nav point unless you have a mod or some ability that allows you to, and there are some in the game that allow you to do them from nav points. So that is the market action. The third thing you can do in the action step is trade cards with another player in your space. So if Han and Lando were in the same space, they could trade cards. Han could swap his cargo for Lando's cargo, or he could sell him something, or he could even, Lando could be have a little bit of gambling debt, and he'd tell Han that his YT freighter is in the impound and he needs a little loan to get it out. And Han can say, sure, I'll loan you 10,000 credits. And Lando is then not bound by the rules of the game to pay that back, even though he agrees to, because it's a hive of scum and villainy. So no deals are binding, so beware of that. Again, that's only if you're on the same space. And that's the final thing you can do in the action step. Now we're going to move on to the encounter step and see how all these things tie together and why you would move to certain places and what you can do. So now let's move on to the third and final step of a player turn, the encounter step. So much like the planning step, you will choose one of these options down here. This is where you will fight a patrol, resolve an encounter card, or resolve a contact token. So let's do those in order. Let's talk about fighting a patrol. So we had discussed in the previous turn pretty much how that works. If you are on a token, it has moved to you and you end your turn there, or you just end your turn there and you make it to the encounter step on a patrol token that you either have negative reputation with, or that you just choose to fight. This is the time where you would just say, I just want to fight them to get the rewards. So I want to fight this level 1 to gain 5,000 credits. You can choose to do that, or you must if you have negative reputation with them. So those are the two stipulations on that. Now let's say you are going to encounter them. They have a ship combat value of 3. Han has a ship combat value of 2, and nothing to modify that. So the attacker, which is always considered to be the active player, rolls first. So Han will take his 2 die. And this is how ship combat works as well as ground combat. You just would add any modifications that you had. So Han would roll his 2 dice. He got a crit and a focus. He doesn't have any way to do anything with that focus, so the crit is worth 2. Then the defender will roll the 3 dice. They got no hits, so Han won. So Han would then discard this level 1 patrol token and gain his 5,000 credits. The level 2 would come off the stack and be placed on the first nav point closest to its stack. Now, if the 2 combatants were tied, the active player, i.e. the attacker, would win ties. So if they had both gotten 2 hits, then Han would have still won. Any damage that you take during combat, you take regardless whether you win or lose. So Han took no damage, which is good. But let's say that the Imperial Patrol had rolled 1 damage. Han would still win the fight and gain the benefits, but he would take that damage. And since it was ship-to-ship since it was on a planet, it's personal combat. So I did that wrong. He would have actually rolled 3 dice because that's something you got to pay attention to. If you're on a nav point, it's ship-to-ship combat. If you are on a planet, even if it's a patrol ship, it is ground combat. In which case, the patrol would still roll its 3 dice, but then Han would have rolled 3 dice as well. So, he got a crit, and say he got his crit, and then he rolled another one. So he would have 3 total hits, let's say. But let's say he took that 1 damage, and since it was on a planet, it's personal damage, so it gets placed on his character. If it was on a nav point that the combat had taken place, then the damage would go to his ship. And they have their own hit points, basically. So that's how that would go. That's encountering a patrol. So, if that wasn't confusing, it's just good to look at whether you're on a planet or on a nav point. That's the type of combat that you're doing. Easy to forget that, so that is one of the, I do believe, frequently overlooked rules. So, the other thing you can do is resolve an encounter card. So, these job cards that you can get off the job deck, and a few are actually in the bounty deck as well, will tell you have a destination on them, as well as the keyword encounter. So, that's when these happen. All cargo and bounties that you've already collected that you're taking to a certain place, which we'll talk about how that works in a minute, happen in step 2, the action step, but encounters, i.e. jobs, always happen in this step. That's a good thing to remember too. It's easily forgettable. So let's just say this was a job that was happening at Naboo, and Han had it. Then he could then resolve it, and it will have you testing your abilities or your skills and things like that, and maybe fighting combats, or it will ask about your reputation with certain syndicates. Anytime you're asked to test a skill, let's say that Han is asked to test his piloting. Well, he has piloting as a skill. So he needs to get 1 hit or 1 crit result in order to pass it, which he got 2 hits, so he would pass that test. Now, if he's asked to test piloting and he did not have piloting, so let's say he's asked to test knowledge. He does not have knowledge. So he still rolls the 2 dice, but in this case, he must get a crit. If he does not have the skill, he must get a crit, which he did, so he would succeed. Now, let's say he was asked to test piloting, and he had piloting here, and then he had a mod or a crew member on his ship that gave him another piloting skill. It would be printed on the card in the same way that it's printed on that one. Then he would only need a face result. Anything, either a focus, crit, or a hit, would succeed. So you become much more likely to succeed the more of those. So it's just 1 or more, you need anything to succeed. So that's how jobs work. Now, if you do a job, that is your encounter. If you do not have a job that's associated with the planet you're on, you then decide if you're going to encounter the planet itself that you're on, in this case Naboo, or one of the contact tokens that is connected to that planet. So each planet has 2 contact tokens associated with them. Why would you want to do that? Let's say that Han is over here, right? And previously, Han had purchased this bounty for Saw Gerrera. It says that its destination, or you're just looking for him. Saw Gerrera is a yellow bordered character. So we know that it's one of these yellow bordered contact tokens. You don't know which one. But you're going to check them all out as you go, or maybe try to do something that lets you peek at them, whatnot. If Han had this in his slot, and he is there, he can choose to either encounter the Kessel card, or maybe he wants to check out one of these contact tokens. So if he does the Kessel card, he would flip this up, and he would look at the Kessel section. There's also a Maelstrom section if he's on the Maelstrom. I'm not going to read out the flavor text to you because I want you to see this whenever you play the game for yourself, but they're going to give you certain things. This one will make him lose a reputation but gain money and the cargo below. So sometimes these can give you cargo. So he would get unrefined coaxium, which is, very fitting at Kessel, right? So he would then place that into his cargo, and he would have to discard if you don't have any open cargo slots. So as you'll notice, these upgraded ships have more spots for cargo. Like the potential Slave 1 ship has 2 cargo slots, 2 crew slots, and a mod slot, whereas Han's starting ship only has 1 cargo, 1 mod, and 1 crew spot. So if you have to discard in order to take it, you would. This would get discarded from the game because it's one of these, and then you would slot your new cargo in there. Or if Han decided not to encounter the planet, he could check out one of those contact tokens, which means that you just pick one of them and reveal them. What do you know? It's Saw Gerrera. So this is how bounties work. If you have a bounty for a contact token that you encounter, then you consult the card, and you see that Saw Gerrera has a combat of 6. And since you're on a planet, it is person-to-person combat. So Han, because of his weapon, gains an extra die, so he's now got a 4. So Han's going to roll 4. Good thing he bought that blaster. And he's going to get 2 hits. And then Saw Gerrera rolls 6. Saw is tough. So he rolls 6. He only gets 1 hit. Han must take that damage, but Han defeats him. Now that Han defeats Saw Gerrera, he has a couple of options. And every bounty has these. So you get an elimination reward. You can either kill him off right there and gain 8,000 credits and 2 fame. Pretty good. Or you can capture him and deliver him to a location, in this case Lothal, to gain 17,000 credits and 2 fame and an Imperial reputation. So he's very wanted by the Imperials, so the credit reward goes way up, the fame is the same, but you choose one of those. If you choose to eliminate him, you just take his token off the board, put it in a discard pile, take your first reward. Then, if you decide to capture him, you would take that token, place it on this card, and then whenever you get to Lothal during the second step, your deliver bounties and deliver cargo step, you would then deliver him to Lothal and gain this better reward. Now, that reflects to Han's particular, not Han's, but some personal goals are like about collecting bounties. Like Boba Fett's, for instance, is about collecting 2 bounties, in which case that's when these personal goal tokens come into play. You place them on your card to signify that you've done one of the steps of your personal goal. Same thing for ships. There are many upgraded ships that you can get, and each upgraded ship has a ship goal on it. So like this one is to fight a ship combat against a player in your space, even if on a planet who has some more fame than you. If you win, you gain 1 fame, and flip the sheet in order to get an even more powerful version, the named version of the ship. So then you would have Slave 1. So anytime that you would have multiple step goals, you would put one of these tokens, on them to mark that. So that's how bounties work. So let's say that Han decides to try to deliver Saw Gerrera to to Lothal. So he'll place that card back into his bounty slot and put that token on top. So he has now checked out what happens when he encounters the planet. Now let's say that Han had decided to investigate this contact token instead of the Saw Gerrera token. So he would flip that one, and Saw Gerrera would still be over there. And he would say, well, I had a 50-50 shot of maybe that being Saw Gerrera because they were both yellow bordered contact tokens, but this is not. This is Grand Admiral Thrawn. Okay. Well, since we do not have a bounty for Grand Admiral Thrawn, we encounter him based on the number that's on this token. We will consult the databank card deck, and we'll look at that number, which is number 11, and we will see what happens. Now, I'm not going to read this flavor text to you again because I want this to be a thing, but you're basically this one's going to give you a job, and it's going to be dependent on some reputation that you have. So that's how you encounter tokens if you do not have bounties for them. And lots of different things can happen. Like in that instance, you could get a job. You could also sometimes potentially get that character as a crew member, in which case you then slot them into your crew and get bonus abilities based on who it is. Like you can get Chewie, and here's a cool aspect of this game. Like Chewie is in the game, and there is a bounty for Chewie. So if you have the bounty for Chewie, then let's see, he's right here. He's very tough to beat. He's a 6. But also, if you don't have a bounty for him and you encounter Chewie's token, then he's one of those that gives you the ability to, out of that databank deck, to take him on as your crew. So let's say Han finds Chewie somewhere. Let's see where Chewie is. And that's Maz Kanata. That's it. Okay, where the heck's Chewie? Chewie! Ooh, where are you, buddy? He's going to be the last one we check, which can happen in this game. Absolutely. So there's Chewie, right? Han encounters Chewie on Takodana, and he's going to encounter his thing. He's going to do some tests, and he brings Chewie onto his crew, which is super cool because, I mean, why would you not want to get Chewie if you're Han, right? Now, the drawback to that is since there is a bounty card in the game for Chewie, if he is in your crew and Lando decides to take that bounty to get Chewie, he can then encounter you at your space and try to collect Chewie's bounty. So he then the player has a choice. If you have Chewie in your crew and Lando comes to collect him, you can so Lando has this bounty. You can decide to either let Chewie fend for himself, and he's pretty strong, so he would roll his six combat die against Lando and, fend for himself, or you can fight personally on Chewie's behalf, in which case, if you take any damage or whatnot, your personal character would take the damage. So you have a choice there. Interestingly enough, you can also collect a bounty on your crew member. So say Han had Chewie in his crew, he could take this bounty, because it's free, as a market action, and place it in his bounty, and now he's actively taken that out of the market so that no other player can do it. But also, if Han is really shifty, he can turn his own crew member in for his bounty, which is very, very underhanded. But this is a game of underhanded things. So that's the other way to encounter a token if you do not have a bounty for them. After you have done one of the 3 encounters at your space, either a patrol, an encounter card, or a contact token, then your turn is over. Turn proceeds to the next player clockwise, and you play until one player has made it to 10 fame. As soon as that occurs, game over. So it is a race of sorts. There will be a winner. So first to 10 or more on their turn ends the game. You can also play a longer game where 12 fame is the target, but this game itself will take you, the box says anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. My experience, it's about 2 hours with 3 players, so I could see that 3 hours possibly with 4 players. I think that's all the rules to this game. If I missed any, just let me know. But I think I've played this game 3 times now, and I think after the first play, I never needed more than this quick reference guide, which pretty much covers everything. The rule book is very good. It is in depth, and like many Fantasy Flight games, you also have this rules reference book, which, I mean, I don't know why you would ever need it, but for, intricate explanations of scenarios that could come up, it's potentially a possibility you would need that book. One cool thing about this game I'll mention right here is that there's also an AI deck that you can use to play a solo game. I think you could probably use this AI deck to add a dummy player if you just wanted to, but I think this game plays great at 2, 3, and 4. So that is how to play Star Wars Outer Rim. Let's move on to our quick review and let you know what we think about the game and our impressions of.
Shut up and kiss me, you walking puppet.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, hi. Never mind. Nothing to see here. Anyway, so hope you liked our how to play video for Star Wars Outer Rim. As you can see, I, for one at least, am a giant Star Wars fan. Leandra is married to a giant Star Wars fan.
Yes, I am.
So she has seen the movies. That being said, we don't play. I have a lot of Star Wars games. You don't play a lot of Star Wars games.
I don't.
You're not interested in them, right?
I'm not really, but this one was really fun.
So, Star Wars Outer Rim, Fantasy Flight's new offering, designed by Corey Konitska, and it'll be releasing really soon. I happened to get an early release copy at the Star Wars Celebration 2019, so I wanted to get a video out, despite Leandra having a galactic virus right now, and not wanting to be on film. I forced her to, like any villainous scum. And,
so I apologize for the nasalness.
But anyway, we're going to give our first impression review of Star Wars Outer Rim. So, not being a giant Star Wars fan, what did you think about the game itself?
The gameplay, it's fun. Obviously, I don't really know the characters as well as you do, but that's really not needed to play the game.
Yeah.
Which I liked, not being a huge fan. It was great. It played smooth. Ben taught it in less than 10 minutes, which if anyone knows, Ben usually takes a little longer to teach games.
Well, I took 20 plus minutes to do the video, so.
Yeah, okay. Well, we learned and played at the same time.
Yeah, which it really does. This rule set in this game really does cater to your type of learning as you play. You can basically just throw this down, go over just a few basic tenets of what's on your player board, and then just jump into the game and learn as you go. It's really designed well for that. If you like the Firefly board game, then this is just a much more streamlined version with that pick up and deliver, that kind of backstabbiness, the ability to. It's a sort of a sandbox game where you can kind of do whatever you want, but the cards that you draw and stuff really do kind of point you in a direction to go. So if you want to score and score quickly, which is the name of the game because it's a race, then you have to kind of follow what you're good at and the leads that you get, and just make the best of the cards that you're dealt in the game, which I always like that, where it's like, you could do anything and it could be overwhelming, but those cards that you draw really do point you in a direction of things that you need to do, the bounties that you get and stuff like that.
Yeah, and so paying attention to what locations are on there was very helpful for me last night, because I was able to get an additional 2 fame just because I happened to be on the right galaxy or the right planet.
Yeah, the right planet, yeah. And so you were able to double up. And so you went from 2 fame all the way up to 10 in maybe 4 turns, which was really fast. So it does go on that. And I was playing as Boba Fett, and I really got stalled out over here having to fight multiple patrols. And it ended up where I was way behind everyone, but within 2 or 3 turns, I caught up and passed Vaughn. So in fame. So it could have a runaway leader. I think somebody could just really get on a roll and just get to that 10 fame really quickly.
Yes.
But that's the nature of the game. I mean, they're playing well. If they do that, they're not just getting lucky. They're playing well, but probably getting some lucky dice rolls and some lucky card draws as well. But either way, for me, this is the space sandbox game that I've been looking for, because as much as Firefly is fun, if you can take that gameplay type and put it in the Star Wars
look
universe.
At it.
Yeah, it's
How
beautiful.
cool is this?
I don't even think they can see it on film right now, but they did just watch they did just watch. It's actually a table hog. It was hard to get the whole thing into frame during the video review or the how to play video. And with the 8 different characters, they all play significantly different. And you've got your classics like Han Solo, and then you've got Lando, and then you've got some people we never heard of. Like you played as
Ketsu?
I'm not a big enough fan to know who Ketsu Onyo is, but she was badass at fighting.
She was badass.
So that really, you just took to it. And usually you're not combative in games, but in this game you were like, hey, if what I got to do is go fight stuff, then I'm gonna go fight stuff.
Yep.
And before you know it, you're like virtually unstoppable in a fight. So that is a big thumbs up from me and from Lee for Star Wars Outer Rim. So as soon as this is released, check it out. And if you have any questions or comments about the video and the rules explanation, then just put it in the comments. And we'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
I got no spit.
You got no spit?